James the Greater, the bold apostle. James, no, not your friend James who never texts you back, but James the son of Zebedee, or as some like to call him, Big James. This wasn't just any disciple. James was one of the original crew called by Jesus himself. With his brother John, they were collectively referred to as the Sons of Thunder. But here's a twist. Big James was actually Jesus' cousin, with his mother Salome being Mary's sister and Jesus' auntie. Imagine being chosen by the Son of God, being a son of thunder and Zebedee, and having Jesus as your cousin. Talk about high expectations. But James didn't just blend into the background. He was known for his fiery spirit, much like that friend who always insists on hitting the karaoke stage, even when no one else is up for it. James was full of passion and action, not just words. As a member of Jesus' inner circle, he witnessed every incredible event, including the Transfiguration. That's right. Big James had a VIP front row seat to witness Christ in his full divine glory, an experience far beyond anything we could imagine today. James's close relationship with Jesus didn't just deepen his faith, it also positioned him as a key figure in the early church. Think of him as the OG, dropping knowledge and spreading the gospel before it was cool. That's who James was, and he was about that life. And when it came to standing firm in his beliefs, Big James was all in. He wasn't one to back down from anyone, embodying the spirit of a true ride-or-die disciple. Leaving it all on the field, James was the first apostle to be martyred, beheaded in Jerusalem in 44 AD by King Herod. John, the beloved disciple. John, the brother of James, the other half of the dynamic duo, the Sons of Thunder, is the disciple who earned the unique title of Beloved, holding a special place in Jesus' heart. Think of John as the one who had VIP access to divine favor. Out of all of the disciples, John was the one closest to Jesus, almost like the teacher's pet, but on a whole other divine level. John's gospel is notorious for being next level, known for its deep theological insight. While the other disciples focused on documenting what Jesus did, John took it a step further, giving insight into who Jesus is. It's as if John was the group's designated theologian, the philosopher who wasn't just interested in the events, but in the deeper existential truths, like the meaning of life, the universe, and everything else. And the ultimate answer? It's all about Jesus. John's close bond with Jesus meant that he was front and center during the most magnificent moments, like the Last Supper and the crucifixion. He was literally the guy standing next to Mary, the mother of Jesus, at the foot of the cross, a testament to his deep connection and loyalty. After Jesus' resurrection, John continued to spread the word with a fervor that made him a central figure in the early church. Even in the face of persecution, John didn't waver. His faith led to his exile on the island of Patmos, kind of like being sent to the ultimate timeout. But exile couldn't silence him. Instead, he experienced mind-blowing visions that would later become the Book of Revelation. Talk about turning lemons into apocalyptic lemonade. And here's the kicker. John was the only disciple that wasn't martyred. Tradition holds that he died of natural causes while still in exile, making him the winner of the ultimate game of Survivor. Andrew, the two-time disciple. Imagine this. You're an ordinary fisherman, going about your daily routine on the Sea of Galilee, when suddenly you receive the ultimate job offer. Not through LinkedIn, but directly from Jesus himself. That's the story of Andrew. Andrew's journey is a lot like that of a tech startup genius. He begins humbly, then recruits his brother to join the venture. But here's where it gets interesting. Andrew wasn't just a newcomer to the spiritual scene. He had already been a disciple of John the Baptist. So he knew his way around the world of religious leadership. But Andrew's defining moment comes when he is called by Jesus as the first disciple, making him a two-time success story in the world of faith. Where Andrew truly excels is in his role as a natural evangelist. His first move? He introduces Peter to Jesus. Picture that conversation. "Hey, Peter, I found the Messiah. Also, bring your A game. This guy's the real deal." And thanks to Andrew's solid networking skills, Peter goes on to become the foundation of the church. Talk about a referral with impact. But Andrew's influence didn't stop there. He took his passion for spreading the gospel on the road, traveling far and wide to establish early Christian communities. Think of him as the Steve Jobs of ancient evangelism, constantly innovating and expanding. According to tradition, Andrew's dedication was so profound that he embraced martyrdom without hesitation, even being crucified on an X-shaped cross. Peter, the Rock. Simon Peter was once a humble fisherman too, living a life of routine on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. This shouldn't come as much of a surprise as he was the brother of Andrew, and we already know what he did. But Peter's world was turned upside down when Jesus called him to become a fisher of men and to start reeling in souls, a transformation that earned him a name change too, now to be called the Rock. A fitting title for one of the most electrifying disciples in history. From that moment, Peter's journey was set on a path to become the cornerstone of the early church, or as we might say today, the people's champ of Christianity, if you can smell what Peter's cooking. A natural leader, Peter was often the first to speak and act among the disciples, but his journey wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Remember when Peter almost drowned after stepping out of a boat in a bold attempt to walk on water? Or the time he impulsively cut off a soldier's ear in the misguided effort to protect Jesus? And of course, there's the infamous moment when Peter denied Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times during the crucifixion. Not cool, Peter. Yet, despite these missteps, Jesus still gave Peter a pass. After the resurrection, Jesus reaffirmed Peter's role, restoring him and solidifying his leadership within the early church. Phew! Ultimately, Peter's unwavering faith led him to Rome, where he faced martyrdom. According to tradition, he was crucified upside down, insisting he wasn't worthy and didn't deserve to go out in the same manner as Jesus. Philip, Mr. Johnny on the spot. Philip was chillin', living his best life when he got the ultimate call from JC himself. Hailing from Bethesda like Andrew and Peter, there's clearly something in the water out there. Without a moment's hesitation, Philip dives headfirst into evangelism, like he's been training for this moment his entire life. Think Rocky Balboa, but instead of boxing and chasing chickens, Philip is spreading the gospel. Philip was one of the original disciples, and if ancient LinkedIn were a thing, his headline would likely read, "Professional Evangelist and Miracle Worker, Open to New Missions." He was a dynamo, globe-trotting the ancient world like he had a frequent flyer card for spreading the good news. Not being one to discriminate, one of Philip's most infamous encounters was an impromptu Bible study with an Ethiopian eunuch. But he didn't just stop at a casual chat. Philip broke down the scriptures like a seasoned pro. Before you know it, he was baptizing the eunuch right then and there. Like Mr. Johnny on the spot. Now that's what I call sealing the deal. And Philip wasn't just a one-hit wonder. His evangelistic journey took him to Samaria, where he turned the place upside down with his preaching. And he wasn't just all talk, drawing crowds like a spiritual rock star, complete with the faith healings instead of guitar solos. Just when you think Philip might take a break, he was off again, traveling far and wide, spreading Christ's message with a passion that makes you question if this guy ever slept. His commitment was relentless, and his impact was undeniable. But of course, there were plenty of haters back in those days. Tradition holds that Philip's dedication was so intense, it eventually led to his martyrdom. While history's a bit fuzzy on the exact details, one thing's clear. Philip didn't do anything halfway. Bartholomew, the skeptic. Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel, was the guy who wasn't afraid to speak his mind, no matter how blunt it might be. When he first heard about Jesus, his immediate reaction was, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Ouch, but Bartholomew didn't go out like that. After meeting Jesus, good old Bart's skepticism did a complete 180, transforming into an unshakable faith. But Bartholomew didn't just join the 12 disciples to enjoy the ride. He was all about action. He took on missionary journeys that led him across the ancient world, including places like Armenia and India. Imagine trying to spread the gospel in ancient India. No Google Translate, no airplanes, just sheer determination, desire, and persistence. And perhaps a few puzzled locals wondering what this guy was talking about. From skeptic to atomic, Bartholomew's dedication to sharing the message of Christ was nothing short of relentless. But, as often happens with those who blaze new trails, his passion came with a heavy price. Record has it that Bartholomew was flayed alive for his faith. That's the true meaning of going down swinging. Matthew, the tax collector turned author. Matthew, no, not the neighbor who's always late with his lawn care. We're talking about the original Matthew, the tax collector who made the ultimate career switch, from crunching numbers for the Romans to writing one of the most significant accounts of Jesus' life, earning him the leadoff spot in the New Testament. Talk about a decorated career change. Imagine this. You're sitting at your tax booth counting coins when Jesus walks up and says, "Hey, drop the bag, leave the money, bada bing, bada boom, we're out of here." If you're Matthew, you might be thinking, "Brah, I'm making bank here. Sure, people hate me, but it's a living." But instead of clinging to his cushy, albeit unpopular job, Matthew does the unthinkable. He gets up and walks away from the loot. And this was huge because tax collectors in those days were like the used car salesman of ancient Israel. Everyone assumed they were a bit shady, collecting extra on the side for themselves. Not saying that was our boy Matthew, but not saying it wasn't. But Jesus saw past all that. He saw potential in Matthew that no one else could, inviting him into the life that would forever change history. As a disciple, Matthew wasn't just a passive observer. He was on the front lines, witness to all of Jesus' teachings and miracles, and he took meticulous notes too, like that one kid in class who always knew what was going to be on the test. Lucky he did, because those notes eventually became the Gospel of Matthew, a detailed and organized account that's still blowing minds today. Matthew connected the dots between Jesus' actions and Old Testament prophecies, showing everyone that he wasn't just a pencil pusher, and that this wasn't just a new chapter in history. It was the fulfillment of prophecies and promises made long ago. As for how Matthew's story ends, that's a bit of a mystery. Some say he was martyred, while others suggest he lived out his days peacefully. Either way, Matthew went from being the guy no one wanted to see knocking on their door to a key figure in spreading the gospel. Thomas, Mr. I don't know about that. Next up, we've got Thomas, better known as Doubting Thomas. Picture this. The other disciples are buzzing. "Dude, we just saw Jesus. He's back." But Thomas, ever the skeptic, is like, "Nah, I don't know anything about that. I'll believe it when I see it." You got to admire his commitment to evidence-based belief. Seeing is believing, right? But Thomas takes it to a whole other level. He doesn't just want to see it. Thomas wants to lay hands on those wounds. But let's be real. This moment of doubt is exactly what makes Thomas relatable. He's like that one friend who's always fact-checking your wild stories on Google. But here's the twist. Jesus shows up and says, "Hey, Thomas, you wanted proof? Bam! Go ahead, touch these scars." And just like that, Thomas sees the light, going from "I'll believe it when I see it" to "my Lord and my God" in a heartbeat. He didn't want that smoke. This moment is more than just a story, though. It's the turning point for Thomas. His doubt wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of his faith journey as Thomas took the gospel all the way to India. Yep, he took a first-century road trip across continents, establishing Christian communities along the way. But Thomas's dedication eventually led to his ultimate end. According to Syrian Christian tradition, Thomas was martyred for his faith, meeting his end on the wrong side of a spear in India in AD 72. His body is said to be interned in Mylapore. So this guy who doubted the resurrection ends up getting taken out for the very thing he once questioned. If that's not a plot twist worthy of M. Night Shyamalan, I don't know what is. James the Lesser, the silent one. Not to be confused with Big James or James, the brother of Jesus, who ironically also becomes an apostle after the resurrection. Let's talk about James the Lesser, the son of Alphaeus. Now, you might be thinking, the Lesser? Why'd they do him dirty like that? But don't let that title fool you. Lesser typically meant shorter or younger back in the day, not less important. So even though this James might not have hogged the spotlight like his more famous counterparts, he was certainly a crucial part of the disciple squad. Think of him as the strong silent type, like John Wick or a spiritual ninja. James was just one of those guys who, while not in the limelight, was always present, quietly holding things together behind the scenes. The Gospels don't provide a detailed James biography, no paparazzi snapshots, no major speeches, no unsung or where are they now episodes. But what's evident is his close connection with Jesus. Imagine being part of every major event, but staying so under the radar that even TMZ wouldn't have noticed. That's James for you. After Jesus' resurrection, when some might have expected him to fall back, James actually stepped up in a big way. He became a pillar of the early church in Jerusalem, guiding and strengthening the fledgling Christian community. If the early church was a startup, James was the reliable co-founder working behind the scenes to ensure everything didn't crash and burn, showing you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to make a significant impact. So, how did things end for James? According to most accounts, he met a pretty grim fate, being stoned for his beliefs. Thaddeus, Mr. 20 Questions. All right, folks, next up we've got Thaddeus, also known as Judas, but not that Judas. Jude Thaddeus, sometimes just Jude, not that Jude, and even Lebbaeus, was the guy in the crew who always had his hand up in class. You know the type, the one who asks the deep existential questions that make everyone else think, wow, I should have asked that. The guy questioned everything, while ironically not questioning that whole Lebbaeus thing. Like, seriously, Lebbaeus? Anywho, Thaddeus' standout moments came during the Last Supper when, instead of quietly nodding along like everyone else, he asked, Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? A bit shady, perhaps. Kind of like asking, why don't we just broadcast this to everyone? But that was Thaddeus for you. Always digging for the deeper meaning, the why behind the what. After Jesus' ascension, Thaddeus didn't just kick back and reminisce about the good old days. Nope, he hit the ground running, spreading the gospel like it was the latest viral trend. Syria, Persia, you name it, your boy Thad was there, setting up Christian communities like a spiritual startup. Thaddeus didn't just ask questions to talk the talk. He walked the walk, even to the point of martyrdom. History tells us he faced a pretty brutal end because he refused to back down from his faith. But it's safe to bet that Thaddeus had some pretty good questions about that too. Simon the Zealot, the revolutionary with a holy upgrade. Imagine being so passionate about a cause that you're ready to take on the entire Roman Empire. That was Simon the Zealot. A guy who didn't just wear his heart on his sleeve, he probably waved it in front of a few Roman soldiers too. Simon was part of the Zealots, a hardcore revolutionary group dedicated to expelling the Romans from Judea. Think of them as the Black Panthers meets the Nation of Islam, but with sharp, pointy weapons. They were the freedom fighters for the ancient world. So while Simon was all like, down with the empire, Jesus comes along, looks at this fiery revolutionary and says, bro, you got mad energy. How about you channel that into something a little less stabby? And just like that, Simon trades his revolution for a mission from God, like the Blues Brothers. Now, don't get me wrong, Simon did his thing during the Gospels, but post-resurrection, Simon becomes a first-century rock star, minus the screaming fans. He journeyed through Egypt, Persia, and other regions, setting up Christian communities faster than you can say Jesus saves, with a lot of converts along the way. His dedication wasn't just about numbers, it was about transforming lives, which started with the transformation of his own. Now, the end of Simon's story is a bit of a choose-your-own-adventure. Some accounts say he was crucified. Others suggest he was sawn in half, and this was no magic trick. Either way, Simon's commitment to the cause will never disappear. Judas Iscariot, a.k.a. that guy. Believe it or not, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, didn't start off bad. He was literally the guy all the disciples trusted with their wallets, handling the bread, wine, and maybe a splurge on some extra virgin olive oil every once in a while. But beneath the surface, Judas harbored turmoil like venom that no good therapy session could fix. One thing led to another, culminating in ultimately Judas betraying the biggest figure in history. So what drove Judas to trade loyalty for silver? It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision as some may think. It was more like a series of disappointments, in his mind, and a slow burn of greed. A deadly combination most would consider a cardinal sin. Eventually, Judas struck a deal with the religious authorities to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, comparable to about 4 months' worth of wages. And how did he seal this deal? With a kiss. So Judas didn't just betray Jesus, he did it with the most ironically affectionate gesture possible. Talk about adding salt to the wound. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. The weight of his betrayal was eating Judas alive. He couldn't shake it off. The guilt consumed him like a bad case of buyer's remorse, but with eternal consequences. Overwhelmed with guilt, Judas tried to return the silver. When that failed to undo the damage, he took the tragic step of ending his own life. Matthias, the backup player everyone forgot. In at lucky number 13, we have Matthias, the disciple who seems to always be left out of the highlight reel. Stepping into some pretty big and somewhat cursed shoes after Judas's infamous exit, Matthias was chosen to fill the vacancy left by the betrayer in what may have been the most spiritually intense game of drawing straws ever. The selection took place in the upper room, where the remaining 11 disciples gathered for some serious prayer. This wasn't a decision made on a whim. They went Old Testament and cast lots, seeking divine guidance on who should join their ranks. When the lots were cast and the dust settled, Matthias was the one called up, like Brady coming in for Bledsoe, proving that sometimes you've got to trust the process and wait your turn for greatness, especially when that process is divinely inspired. But Matthias wasn't just a bench warmer. He dove straight into the action, actively participating in the early church's mission to spread the gospel. His dedication wasn't just mere lip service either. He traveled far and wide, reportedly reaching regions like Cappadocia and the Caspian Sea, racking up those frequent missionary travel miles. As for his end, the details are a bit sketchy. Some accounts suggest Matthias met his fate by stoning, while others say he was beheaded. Either way, Matthias' story didn't end as well as it started, and he was forced into early retirement.